Magandang araw, Podmates! Howie Severino muli na nagpapaalala na nakakatalino ang mahabang attention span. May guest na naman tayong dakilang Pilipino, si Floy Quintos, na haligi na sa sine ng teatro. Siyang sumulat ng Reconciliation Dinner, Kundiman Party at marami pang iba. Dahil sa sari-sari niyang interes sa kultura, tinawag nga siyang culture Polymath. Tatalakayin natin ang ibig sabihin niyan. Magandang araw sa iyo, Floy.
Magandang araw sa iyo, Howie. Salamat po sa paanyaya ninyo.
Yeah, congrats sa lahat ng mga obra mo, Floy. No? But before I ask you about any recent work, sabihin ko lang na napakinggan ko ang isang interview sa iyo, recent interview. No? Sinabi mo na nagsimula ang playwriting career mo sa high school. But I distinctly remember sitting in the audience as a grade schooler sa Ateneo Grade School, grade 7. Magka-batch tayo no, no? At binanggit ang pangalan mo sa credits, no? So I have to make a slight correction in your own bio as you're sharing it with others. I think you started even earlier than high school.
Maraming salamat. Oo nga, pinagsulat kasi ako ni ang yumaong si Professor si Sir Singson, Mariano Singson, ng isang kanta lang at ilang bahagi ng dialogue para sa dulang, I think, Ibalon or Ang Mahiwagang Anino. Na napakasaya ko naman na ginawa ko yon at na-print siya sa program. Pero tama ka, siguro doon nga talaga ang una kong simula bilang mandudula.
Yeah,
and napakaliit ng partisipasyon.
That was very early, no? So anyway, of course hindi mo tinuloy yung pagka-atinista mo, no? Nag-UP high ka, and then nag-UP college where you learned mass comm, no? Nagulat din ako, hindi ka nag-major sa fine arts or theater, but in UP, you learned theater from some of the luminaries, sila Ben Cervantes, sila Tony Mabesa, and you done everything in production na kinwento mo nga na I think pinagtahi ka pa yata ng costume. So you've said that theater people, based on your own experience, theater people can run the nation. Please elaborate.
Okay. Totoo yun kasi ang iniisip kasi ng mga tao pag teatro, either acting or directing. Di ba? Kasi napaka-visible noon. Hindi nila nakikita yung buong proseso na dapat pagdaanan para maging ganap na theater person. And I think I'm very lucky and members of my batch were also very lucky na sa UP, pinagdadaanan mo dapat lahat yon. In fact, I remember Tony Mabesa saying na kung gusto mo lang maging artista, hindi pwede. Kailangan alam mo ang gumawa ng costume, kailangan mo magpatakbo ng production, kailangan mo mag-anticipate ng problema. And that's why most of the best production people, working today in the entertainment industry, in the broadcast industry, have theater backgrounds. Kasi natututunan mong maging masinsin, natututunan mong maging OC, natututunan mo maging mag-anticipate ng problema. And syempre, ang production works on order. Dapat naka-schedule, tama, may plan A, plan B, plan C. Natututunan mo lahat yun sa teatro. And I noticed that a lot of my successful corporate friends, yung mga nag-corporate, kaibigan ko dati sa Dulaang UP. Kaibigan ko dati. Meron talaga silang foresight. Okay, medyo masama kasi OC sila. Hindi sila nakakapagbitaw ng trabaho pag-uwi. Pero yung sense of organization, yung sense of anticipation, yung anticipate the problem. And meron ka ng agad solusyon. Yun ang natutunan ko talaga sa teatro. And then yung pagka-well-rounded ka. Kaya ko nasabi yun.
So theatrical experience, even just in college, will be able to help you in almost any career.
I think Howie talaga is yung sense of organization. That's why nasabi ko talaga they can run a nation. And nakita ko talaga yun. The way some of my corporate friends run their businesses, their small businesses, or their big corporate businesses.
Okay, so you really got into theater at UP. Pero ang isang ikinagulat ko, nabanggit mo na kanina, hindi ka theater major, no? Nag-major ka sa journalism. Mass comm, journalism, sa UP. Bakit hindi theater?
Okay, sabi kasi ng tatay ko, alam ko naman na ang puso mo na sa teatro. Pero please, mag-aral ka naman ng isang trade. Okay, sabi ko na. And I was very interested also in journalism. Doon na nagsimula ako sa bilang nung high school ako. Ang summer job ko sa under my aunt Melinda Quintos de Jesus.
Haligi din yun ng journalism.
Yes.
Sabihin natin.
Yes.
Oo.
She gave me work as a proofreader for TV Times and then started assigning me articles. So high school pa lang, ay ang saya pala magsulat. So naisip ko magandang gawing profession ito. And one of the things I'm proudest of, how ito naabutan mo din, si Miss Jessica naabutan niya din ito, is we learned from Louis Beltran, from Professor Ingles. I mean from the stalwarts of journalism and the stalwart of good writing. Yung economical...
Mga professor sa UP yon. Kasi many people maybe
mga
remember Luis Beltran as a columnist, as a radio commentator. Pero naging dean pa yata sa UP, ano?
Yes, naging dean siya. But one of the things I'm proudest of is that Journal 101, 102, 103 ko sa kanya. Bakit siya naging importante? Ang sarap kasi nang lumawak yung isip ko, lumawak yung... That helped me also in how to market plays, how to write publicity. That was my first job. But then, yung journalism, I thought, was really a good way to pull out of theater and look at the world from another point of view, to learn a trade. And the values of the trade.
When I learned that you majored in journalism at UP, parang it helped explain your interest in current affairs, no, in society and politics. You're very, very engaged with what's going on, no. Of course, you've written about history as well, no. But you somehow connect everything then to what's going on in society, no. But so I want to now use that to jump off on to two of your more recent plays, no? Both critical hits, no? Yung Kundiman Party and Reconciliation Dinner, both very current, no? Yung Kundiman Party was slightly older, but because it was about the Duterte era, staged during the height of the Duterte administration in 2019, I believe. And then the more recent a Reconciliation Dinner na isinulat mo rin, no? Tungkol naman sa election ng 2022. It's about two families that get together for dinner, no? After they were estranged, no? By the election ng 2022, no? One family campaigned for Marcos and one family campaigned for Robredo. Pero I saw the May 2023 version of Reconciliation Dinner. And this is the third time it's being staged, no? And each time it's staged, you update the script, no? You revise the script dito sa Reconciliation Dinner. So first, Floy, no, why did you write this play, and why do you need to keep revising and updating it?
Number one, practical concern. Dula ang UP needed a comeback after the pandemic. Sulatan mo naman kami ng madaling stage, yung hindi masyadong mahal. Okay. I'll always do that for Dulang UP. But what I'm saying, ano isusulat ko? Napakahirap kasi nung pagbabalik ng teatro pagkatapos ng pandemya. Tapos ang feeling ko, hindi siya kumukonect sa audience. Kasi a good play that we've always been taught as a good play is something that elevates the material into a metaphor, but I like to be direct. And I thought that after the elections, we needed a direct reference to what was going on. Wag na natin i-sugarcoat or do it through metaphor or for imagery. Let's talk about what's going on now. Let's talk about what we're feeling now. And actually, cardinal rule yan sa mga playwrights na even novelists or something, you take it out, you elevate it. But I didn't feel it needed to be elevated. I thought the discussion was important enough to write about it in the ways we are affected, in using direct references, direct imagery, direct happenings. It's a touchstone. I look at both plays, Kundiman and especially Reconciliation Dinner. I don't know if they will ever be classics. I don't think they will be. But I look at them, Howie, as snapshots of an important period of our lives. Middle class sila. Two friends na nagkahit na very close, nagkahidwaan, nagkabalikan dahil may personal crisis yung isa. And then what happens in the dinner, nung isang little incident lang na nagalit na naman silang lahat. Ganun naman kasi tayo ka-volatile ang feeling ko, Howie. Ganun tayo ka-volatile. And it's very symptomatic of what we're going through now, as even as people, as individuals. We pretend everything is okay. We pretend we can move on. We pretend to put it aside. But with one little konting kanti lang, babalik at babalik yan eh. Napakasakit kasi sa atin yan. We can go on pretending and putting on the social mask of being polite and just putting it aside. Pero hindi maalis siya.
Obviously, this is a play about current politics, no? Our current our divide, no? The polarization, etc., which is of course still very intense, still very current, no? But ano yung mga binabago mo, no? Are you taking things from the news and inserting it into the play?
Okay. In the first place, medyo mahirap yun how. Number one, I would not say revised, I would say tweaked. Every version is tweaked. Number two, it's very set yung time frame ng play. As at least for the second production in May, I expanded the time frame from the night of the Marcos burial all the way to the first anniversary of the BBM win. So that's a whole 7 years. For this version, I don't want to go beyond that because that's, as I said, a snapshot of our times. Kasi for me right now, no, you're talking with my relationships with other people, with they're always saying, one of the key sentiments now is, nandyan na yan. Tanggapin nyo na lang and let's just all do the best, which is safe, which is very sound. It's very sound. It's very practical. And that is a line that Bert says many times, alam mo, tanggapin nyo na lang. I mean, what does this do? What does all this discussion do? Just accept it and let's try to work. We all love the Philippines. Mahal naman natin. Yun, without doubt. And to which one of the counter thought is what Norby, again, who represents the very young, very polarized LGBTQIA, no? And he says, for as long as it takes to remember, I will not forget. That's the quandary we are now. Everything seems to be on the surface, Howie. Everything seems to be status quo. Biden has accepted BBM. Nothing's wrong, nothing, but is it really? So what do we need to do as a concerned citizenry? It's not to forget. Not to forget this passion that we have, not to forget that's all we can do now. And the play ends, the ending of the play, which is that slap on Bert's face. I've expanded. And at the risk of giving it all away, no, Bert says to the original line that Bert says to Dina is, alam mo yung mga pinklawan, while he's wiping his face of the ice cream, no, of the cake. Alam mo yung mga pinklawan na yan, talagang pikon. Wala naman laman yung barila. And then I added a line which is very important. Alam mo, makakalimot din sila. Give it a few more months, they'll forget, and everything will be back to normal. And then Dina just slaps him across the face and then embraces him again. So I think that whole line is exactly where we are now. Brief as it is, it's exactly where we are now. The edge of forgetting. The edge of saying, sige na nga, tanggapin na natin. Okay, tanggap. And as one of the other characters says, as the character of Frances Mackil says, oo, natanggap na namin. But again, dadalhin namin to. So that's where we are.
Good point. Kasi even if you accept something, doesn't mean you can't remember it and learn from it, di ba?
Of course, to memorialize.
Yan din ang sense.
When I talk to my friends from who have different political leanings, ay, bakit pa ba? Diyos ko, ayan na oh. Wala naman tayong makitang kabindi-bindi. Prices are going up, but they've always been going up. Di ba, ang daming ways to justify things, which are a way of leading us to forget. And that's the point of this last staging of reconciliation dinner, not to forget.
You try to humanize both sides, no? So, kasi, sometimes one side tries to dehumanize the other side dahil magkaaway nga, no? Especially this past election was quite polarizing. But you humanized the pro Marcos family and the pro Robredo family, no? But the audience was obviously partisan based on the applause lines and sometimes the cheering and obviously, no, na ganon yung audience at least during the night I was there, no. And then sabi mo nga minsan nagiging echo chamber, no, yung mga productions mo, no, it attracts only a particular kind of audience. But does that disappoint you? Kasi yun nga, I mean, this is about reconciliation. You're trying to get people together, and theater is, meant to gather people so that, they're able to reflect on their foibles then, and why they're fighting, etc. Pero kung it's only one type of audience attending, I mean, I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Okay, thank you. Napakahalaga nung question na yun. Kasi ang dami, may mga friends ako na who came to the show, tapos paglabas nila, ang sabi na sa akin, akala ko naman titirahin mo, pulahan lang. Bakit naman mas masakit siya sa dilawan? Kasi totoo, sabi ko, because being of the same political ideology, I see the flaws. I see how close we are. I see how reactionary we can be. And I also see the division within us between the more radical young people, the more radical young supporters of Robredo, who are willing to take to the streets again, the character represented by the character of Norby, and the older Dilawan set who must the civil society. There's a very telling line in the play: civil society is dead. Kailangan ngayon barubalan society. And again, I think that reflects an important shift, schism in what we're going through. Now, am I disappointed that, number one, Howie, I have pulahan friends who've come to watch the play. And paglabas nila, tawa din sila ng tawa. And sabi nga nung isang friend ko, pardon my language, sapul sa both sides. So, small victories like that, I'm happy about. Another point, may isang kaibigan na nagsabi sa akin, alam mo bakit ba yung Kundiman Party at yung reconciliation dito? Napaka-middle class naman ang point of view. Totoo naman eh. Who has been most affected by the Duterte years? Who is in a moral quandary? It's the middle class, how? It's what we once called civil society, the middle class, which is now slowly disintegrating. Who supports Philippine theater? I mean, original material of Philippine theater, it's the middle class. The CD will not watch theater. The higher classes, they won't watch theater. They'll spend their money on K-pop or on whoever. It's the middle class that's really watching. That's my audience. And that's why I always say, I will write for that class of people. Kasi number one, kahit sila nagbabayad ng 800, 1,000, sila nagbabayad niyan. Sila ang pumupunta, sila ang aware sa mga nangyayari sa local theater. Now, am I disappointed that I'm attracting only what used to be called the Dilawan? I wouldn't look at it that way. I would look at it as, am I talking to the last vestiges of a civil society that can once again make a change if they wanted to? That's what I'm looking at. I've always said, Howie, that in my work, I've never been attracted to the idea of numbers. Kasi right now we live in a numbers-oriented generation. How many hits, how many audiences, how many running, doesn't matter to me. Never bothered me. And I've always wanted to say how many people are genuinely still affected. And that's important to me.
Well, you align yourself politically with much of your audience, but you say you lovingly mock them. Itong mga tita na kilala mong nasa echo chamber nga, no? You especially doon sa Kundiman Party, no, yung mga ritual, mga habits ng mga middle class na yan, mga mayaman actually. I mean, pag sinabi mong middle class, these are maybe university professors, etc. But some of your characters have actually been aristocratic, di ba? Doon sa Kundiman Party nga, they were singers, no, opera singers, and very gumagamit sila ng traditional na sining, no, traditional art na Kundiman. Pero what was really interesting about it then was it bridged this Kundiman tradition, no, with the social media age, no. and then everyone got riled up kasi about the issue of that time, yung horror of the drug war killings.
If you look at it kasi, pag talagang pinaral mo yung Kundiman, supposedly love lang yan. But really, the Constancio de Guzman, Hussein Batute, they were writing about a bigger thing. You have to put the Kundiman in context of the early American occupation, where you could not say these things. Instead, by using love for a woman as a metaphor for love for nationhood, pinagkakaitang oo is actually pinagkakaitang freedom. So and then if I tried to use the kundiman to reflect also what was happening in the country at the time. Mutya ng Pasig became a song about the defense of the West Philippine Sea. Nasaan Ka Irog became mourning for lost loved ones who had been lost to the drug war. Alam mo, Howie, kasi kasalanan natin, lagi nating sinasabi, tapos na yan, finish na yan, that's over. That's an old art form. And kaya napaka-rootless tayo bilang tao. I hate to bring this up, but you look at Korea. You look at the way they have referenced their history in their telenovelas, the way their food, their culture, it's napaka-strong. Tayo meron kasi talaga, ay luma na kasi yan. So, ayun, that was one of the things I wanted to do also in the Kundiman Party, is to show that we need, that in order for us to resist, and to resist well, dapat i-acknowledge din natin yung pinagdaanan natin, yung forms of resistance. Kung ngayon, social media, dati, meron tayong kundiman.
Ngayon, nabanggit mo nga na kundimans traditionally, especially during that period, were a form of resistance. It was a way for people to express resistance without being overt, without taking up arms. It was a way for people to assert, what they were really feeling without being too obvious about it. Anyway, so in-update mo nga yung concept ng kundiman, and you actually made this play, which was interpreted by many as a protest, It was a protest against what was happening at that time. Ang daming pinapatay dito sa drug war. There was a lot of horror, and then you put this on the stage, And someone asked you, was this play seditious? And asking you to self-incriminate, But ang sagot mo, the play isn't seditious. It doesn't call for the downfall of this administration, but it does call for a change in the way we perceive struggle and our part in it. Art has never led to a major revolution. Art cannot do that. That's not the purpose of art. Propaganda, maybe. Art is only there to help an audience process a moment in time. Nung binabasa ko to, naisip ko, Floy is a student of history, parang art has never led to a major revolution. Wasn't Jose Rizal an artist? He was a novelist, he was a poet, he was a visual artist, etc. And Bonifacio himself was a theater actor. He was
was a theater actor.
Macario Sakay also, was in Moro Moro, and in fact they were using that to kind of do the same thing that others were doing to the kundiman, was kind of expressing, what was in their heart without being too obvious about it with the authorities, etc. So, itong denial about being seditious, and saying that art has never led to a major revolution. Do you want to now that the Duterte era is over, do you want to revisit that statement?
Okay, yes, I do, and I am not changed at all about it. Art will awaken. It will help you reflect. But it's not going to hold the knife for you. It's not going to hold the bolo for you. It's not going to tear the cedula. It awakens things in us that make us actually want to do things. But to actually lead it, it takes much more. That's what I'm trying to say, Howie. It takes much more to lead a revolution. It takes much more than just enlightenment, art, catharsis. It takes so much more. And though friends in the struggle, whom I have close to, have said the same thing, that bagamat binubuksan mo yung mata ng tao, bigat pinupukaw mo ang damdamin, hindi pa din yun revolusyon, hindi pa din yun pag-aalsa. Iba yun. That's the difficult part of it, and that's the part we are perhaps afraid of. And personally, sasabihin ko, yun ang kinakatakot ko. I cannot do that. I cannot. But I can help create. I will not take the sole responsibility for that, because there's directors, there's actors in the theater who put your vision forward. Let me tell you a very interesting thing, Howie. Ang nag-produce ng second run, ang nag-produce ng second run sa circuit nung Mayo, at ang nagpo-produce nung third run ngayon sa PETA ay si Stella Cañete Mendoza, who plays Dina. She put together everything. She sold it to her. Why? I said, Stella, you don't have to do this because I can't do this now. No, I'm busy with other things also. No, she says, and all the actors agreed, we want to do this because we feel it's important. So, nag-show by sila. They sell the shows to others who are like-minded and who have to sell tickets. They sell it to show buyers who, like Michelle, who strongly believe in what the play is saying. That is their form of activism. I mean, hindi biro ito. I keep telling Stella, alam mo, hindi biro yung ginagawa mo. I mean, don't pay me na. Don't pay me. Use the money for the production. Because that's their advocacy. That's their way of saying that we believe in the material. And that, for me, that is when art crosses over into trying to actively do something. And that's why I will always say it's not my work. It's really the work of Dexter Santos also. It's the work of the actors who are so committed and who take to my rewrites. Ako pa naman, when I watch a rehearsal, biglang, ay, teka, add natin to. And yet they go into it with such love and gusto. So, ayun.
Well, yeah. So, nakita nga natin lahat, no? Yung the efforts that have gone into productions like that, no? Political productions. So there are these various media, no? There's theater, there are movies.
Yeah.
There's journalism, no? That have tackled these issues, no? These burning issues about injustice, no? And just the horrors of what's happening today, you know. And yet sometimes feeling ko parang sometimes it's for naught, no? Kasi kita mo how the public has responded to how it's behaving politically, basically. Why are all these seemingly powerful media parang walang impact?
Okay. Yes, I will agree, but that's because we choose to play the numbers game. Talagang walang impact yan. Tabi mo yan sa K-pop, tabi mo yan sa kung anong trend ngayon ang nangyayari. Of course, clearly, by any given measure, talo. But at the same time, what I think these efforts, futile as they may seem, what these efforts continue to do is to build a voice, to build a conscience, an artistic and cultural conscience that will be there, that will persevere. Okay? We, again, it's the whole question of can we lead a revolution, which right now in the current culture, can we change minds? Can we capture hearts and minds? Little by little, yes, but we need to persevere. And you see that a lot. Actually, you see that in the counterculture movements, the indie film, which is counterculture to mainstream, broadcast and film. You see it in the works of the young VLF, Virgin Lab Fest writers, which is contrast to the bigger, the glossier Broadway productions. Di ba? Nakikita, and that's the whole purpose. That's the way it was. That's the way it was during the time of Jean Cocteau and Simone de Beauvoir in Paris. That's the way it was during the time of Henry Miller in Broadway. We, in the Philippines right now, we're just echoing that whole current of dissent and resistance and alternative thinking, which is happening the world, which has happened since time immemorial in the art scene. Yun talagang papel natin. Kaya nga ang akin, if we can just rid ourselves of the burden of popularity. Rid yourself of that burden of popularity and just do the good work. Kasi if you burden yourself with, I'm not being seen by 7 million people, talagang wala. You cannot, because in order to get 7 million hits or to you have to do the most ridiculous things. Aminin naman natin. You have to do the most mababaw things. A lot of people are brilliant at doing that. Some people just don't want to do that and would rather concentrate on the craft. That's why we went to school. That's why we studied. That's why we're fortunate enough to have studied under Louis Beltran, Tony Mabesa, Ben Cervantes, Anton Juan. Yun na yung edge. Gamitin naman natin in a way that puts it out there. I always say like this, what do we do ba as artists? If we do bad art, no one's gonna die. Unlike architecture, if you design a bad building, people will die. If you're a bad doctor, people will die. No one will die because of bad art. No one will die because of a bad production. No one will die because of a bad painting. Pero good work, done correctly, done with the right spirit and the right intention, that will move 2 or 3 young people. And that's Howie, that's what I live for sa mga production ko. When young people come up to me and okay, good. So let's keep in touch. And then they'll sir, can we do this play? Can we? Yes, by all means, do my plays in your school. Oh, let's go. I'll try. Yung ganon, yung little by little, you're building a future of young artists who will think alike, criticize alike, create alike. And as long as that's there in the undercurrent of our culture, then we've done our jobs. Again, let me bring up something. Here Lies Love, the big Broadway musical now that's an all-Filipino cast. And then, of course, they're doing it in a disco setting. I haven't seen the production, but I have friends there. And right now, but if you read a lot of people who say, wonderful, distinctive staging, you turn the theater into a disco. But there are voices that talk about appropriation of material, about trivialization of issues which still affect us as Filipinos. Ayun, may ganun. Diba? So, there. As long as we theater can be popular, we can aim to be extremely popular and extremely hip, and extremely hip is the word. But at the same time, we still need to, I think, acknowledge the fact that there are struggles that belong to people, to a people to tell. There are struggles which affect us to this day. There are issues which we in the Philippines still take seriously, but which may have been trivialized because of the production method. Ganon.
Yeah, okay. Now that you mentioned Here Lies Love, no, kasi that's much talked about. It's controversial. I mean, just for background of our listeners, then Here Lies Love is about Imelda's disco days during the first Marcos administration in the 1960s and 70s up to the 1980s yata. Nagdi-disco pa si Imelda sa Malacanang and New York and elsewhere, no? They turned the stage into a disco floor, so my audience participation and all of that. So it's very, very entertaining. Pero yun nga, yung debate rito, Floy, is parang may nasasaktan ba rito in terms of yung interest ng mga tao, ng mga naging biktima ng mga Marcos, etc. No? So there are actually critics of Marcos, of the first Marcos, and critics of Imelda who actually liked it, no? Who actually like it and say that actually may lumabas nga itong mga issues na to, no? I mean, and then even the disco scenes were kind of a critique of the frivolity of it all, no? And the fact that we're actually talking about it shows na may impact itong musical na to, no? But there are some who say it's doing a disservice to the Philippines and dapat wag panoorin. So I take it that you support the staging of this, and if you had a chance, would you see it?
Sorry, not sorry, but frankly, I'm not interested. Why? Number one, the disco setting talagang parang throws me off. Of course, it's an artistic license. We can always claim artistic license. But there's a very, very brilliant review that I read by a playwright, by a Filipino playwright in New York. What Ralph Peña of my was saying was, does Doña Aurora have to sing about being a drummer boy and not, yun na nga yung curation of facts, yung curation of moments. That's also the job of a playwright, to curate important things which say something about our history. And maybe, although I have not seen it, but from what I'm reading, yung curation nga nun. And then of course yung point ni Elmer Gatchalian, whom I always read. He's also an art critic, no? And an art historian. He's written a lot. Yung kay Elmer is, do we need to talk about this now? Must this be presented with such gloss now to an audience that doesn't know? Diba? That is not quite aware of it, of what happened. Ang theater kasi, you know what, Howie, it can be very, very tricky because in the way you choose a subject matter, in the way you, in a sense, glamorize it, it really puts everything in a more perfect, cleaner perspective, no? Because of production. So are we sending the wrong message about that period? I think that's the question we all need to say. Again, I have not seen the production, but from what I've read about it, and from what the counter views course, very interesting. But you'll notice how a lot of the rave reviews praise the production, and by the production, music, like the way that it's so innovative in getting an audience to sing, to dance with. So it's a production concern. Ang sinasabi ng isang side is a content concern. And that's important also. There's the production concern, the gloss of it, which is very Broadway. That's an American art form, diba? The gloss, the musicality of it. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I love Broadway. So there's production, but there's also content. And I think what the counter critics are saying is always about content and the importance of context.
But basically, Polymath is somebody who's knowledgeable or talented in many things, no? So tinawag kang ganun. Kasi, you know, you've made a name for yourself in theater, playwriting, directing, production, etc. No, but you have another persona as someone who is a collector, even a champion, no, of pre-colonial artifacts, cultures. You have a large and valuable collection of bulols and other kinds of and other artifacts like that, no, and also fabrics. Your fabrics have been displayed in many places. They're in museums, etc. No, so you mentioned kasi kanina, no, I mean the need to remember, no, I mean we were just referring to the Marcos years and what happened in the 1970s and 80s, pero itong mga kinokolekta mo, they're centuries old, no? So how do you juggle this in your mind? No, I mean, you know, you're updating Reconciliation Dinner, which is very, very current, you know, based on what's happening on social media, etc. No, and then you're thinking about, you know, itong mga centuries old rice gods, no, yung animist art, you know, things that most people don't even think about.
Objects are beautiful. Objects are worth obsessing about. And I do. But really, I keep reminding myself, more than just an object, these things connect us to what we have lost, our animist soul. Okay? I'm not knocking Christianity. I'm a devout Catholic. And how that exists within me, I don't know. But we've lost that. What does a textile represent? In this age of fast fashion, a textile represents great technical knowledge. The looms were the first computers how. And to think that these things, that the ancient weavers, the traditional weavers never wove with a template. It was all here. If you understand the way a textile is put together, how let's say even in recent times, how a langdulay, of course our Gawad Manlilikan ng Bayan, how a salintamonon, how they would dye. Look for the right fiber. Look for the right dyes from the forest. Tie these into complex patterns which you don't see. Pero pag hinabi nilang ganon, ang ganda. It's a whole mindset. It's number one, what do these objects represent? A spiritual knowledge, a technical knowledge, an economic knowledge, a knowledge of biology and botany rather, of botany. They're so total and so complex. And they represent for me what Professor Felipe de Leon, one of the men I really admire, will always call an integrated Filipino, an integrated soul, an integrated individual. But to look at the textile, to hold it in your hands, and to realize that this is the work of that this is more than just aesthetic, to use a popular word now. It's biology, it's botany, because you have to learn how to grow the plant, how to grow the cotton, how to find the right dye. It's the complexity of math. Mathematics yan. It's not just pa-art. We like to think of it as art, spirit. No, it's math. Mahirap gawin yan. Mahirap i-warp and weft. That's science. That's precision. It's discipline. How do you weave ba? You have the weavers on backstrap looms, they sit up straight for 4 hours. They cannot, ang concentration yan is intense. Let's look at prestige symbols like the hagabi, like the bulol. These are products of intense spiritual. We always look at them as beautiful. Again, we look at these as art. We miss out on the fact that these are objects that combine all the best things about the culture. And I try as much as possible to educate the market on it. What do these represent? This represents the totality of Ifugao social culture. Meron akong hagabi, mayaman ako, nagpagawa ako ng hagabi. Pero sinong gumagamit ng hagabi? Everybody in the village. Kasi you can't put it in your house. It's under your house. So everyone can lounge in it. Ano yung significance nun? Paano ka nagkahagabi? Bago ka nagkahagabi, pinakain mo through ritual feasts ang buong village for 9 consecutive years. To earn status, to earn that kind of a status in traditional Ifugao society, you had to have had a corresponding social responsibility. That's what fascinates more than the object itself. How are these objects reflective of a more socially equitable idea of status? And it's interesting also because I have many Ifugao friends, and when you ask them, bakit hindi na kayo nagbubulol? Kasi napakamahal maging kadangyan. To be kadangyan, to achieve that status, you're constantly feeding people around you. You're constantly throwing feasts. Prestige had an equal social responsibility. Ganda, no? Hindi ba? You don't get that from an LV bag. You don't get that from an Hermes bag. All you need to do is buy it. But among the Ifugao and among many traditional societies, prestige was equated to social responsibility.
Baka hindi lahat nakakaintindi kung ano yung bulol. It's a rice god. Tama, no? It's a rice god.
It's a deity that protects the rice. It's the rice family. Dinalagay siya sa alang or sa kamalig para protektahan at padamihin ang bigas. Pero hindi natin alam ano ba yung earlier, ano ba yung nasira nung panahon ng Kastila? Ang dami ding likha na nasira. And I have a feeling, kung pag-aralan natin yung recent studies ni Professor Stephen Acevedo at ng Ifugao Archaeological Project, na again very interesting to Howie, no? Sana I hope your viewers can latch onto this. Lagi natin iniisip the Bayer theory na ang rice terraces ay 3,000 years old. The Acevedo studies show that it could be 500 years old only, and a resistance to Spanish colonization. Ganda. Worth thinking about.
Are these traditional cultures being threatened now? Yung
Matagal
cultural
na.
production in terms of go.
Matagal na talaga, Howie. Lagi natin iniisip na ang damage sa ating indigenous cultures nangyari nung panahon ng Amerikano. Hindi. I just like to debunk that. It happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Land grabbing, militarization, all yung pagkukuha ng indigenous lands nila. That happened during our time. Nasa konsyensya natin yon as contemporary Filipinos. Huwag natin sisihin ang mga kano. Of course, kailangan natin sabihin na inevitable ang change. But at the same time, we cannot, for me, I cannot say to my Ifugao friends, no, or to my Kankanay friends, continue living in your homes, in your bale. Continue living. No, they have all the right to what modern convenience. They have all the right to education. Tayo kasi, mga contemporary lowland Filipinos, we like to think of them as something like the noble savage. We still have that baggage. No, they are people, they are Filipinos like us. They are entitled to what we have, to what we are able to have. We cannot put them in that vacuum. And little by little, because of education, they are beginning to change too. And they have all the right to change. And for me, that is where collectors, museums, anthropologists can come in. It's because part of that is the death is choosing to discard the detritus of their material culture. Number one, wala na sa kanila yun. Hindi na importante. It's not in the present. But we keep it for them. We keep it for us. We keep it to exchange among a small community of people who admire and who like. We are able to place important collections in museums. That's where the collector is important. That's where we are important. Because this constant detritus will happen. It will continue to happen for as long as people change. Because tanggapin natin, the old ways are no longer important or practical. Just as much as we like to say it, just as wearing the terno or the barot saya every day is, or the barong Tagalog every day, or even that, we're guilty of that. Hindi ba? So as long as there is change happening in a society, that's where the collector stands as important. Now, what is left? Yung iniisip na, what is left of the indigenous people? What is valuable for them? For example, sa Ifugao ngayon, ibebenta nila ang bulol, itatago nila ang gansa, the musical instrument. Because that's part of the intangible heritage which they bring out. And that I love. Pinakagusto ko 'yon. Makikita mo sa mga rituals, sa harvest rituals, yung mga batang naka-jeans, naka-t-shirt, nagmomoma, nganga, tumutugtog ng gansa, and their gansa playing is so vibrant. Ano yung matitira? What is kept is what is important to them. Let them be the judge of what is important to them. We cannot tell them na, no, this has to stay there. I hate this purist mentality na it has to stay with them. Ay, wala na sa kanila eh. Baskets are beautiful, but right now, plastic is more important. Is that bad? Aesthetically, maybe. But then, choice nila yon. It is a choice. And we have to give them that agency.
Sure,
there's
it's
a
also
lot of
important.
discussion now about the beautiful, the gold necklace which Beauty Gonzalez wore. I understand where they're coming from, but you have to understand also na bagamat there's the 2010 law which says that everything excavated belongs to the government, right? You have to understand the rampant 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s diggings that were going on. This was 1960, half a century away. And dadalhin sa Maynila yung mga nahuhukay. Alam mo, yung mga hindi nabibili, pinaparte, minemelt, dinadala sa Bukawi, tinutunaw for the gold value. Because, again, aanuhin naman nung mga taga Samar, let's say, or Butuan, aanuhin nila yung gintong nahukay kung hindi nabili, kung hindi naging cash, di tunawin na lang. So, a lot of the important gold that we see in the Bangko Sentral, that we see in the Ayala Museum collections, which are outstanding public collections, and a lot of the ones that are in private collections, these were actually salvaged from the melting pot. Kasi yun ang reality dun sa mga nagdidig eh. Hindi mo naman pwede sa kanilang sabihin na, itago nyo yan. Bakit? Hindi ko makain yan. Kailangan kong again, the practical concern, kailangan pakainin ng pamilya ko. Kailangan ko yan. And rather than kung hindi mabenta, sunugin, na lang, i-melt na lang, tinda sa per kilo. A lot of the things which are now being shown, which are being worn publicly, a lot of these things, yes, lahat naman yan galing sa patay. Lahat naman yan, I feel, talagang galing sa grave. Now, were they robbed? In a sense, yes. Totoo yun. But then, that was the reality of the times. These pieces exist today because someone bothered to buy them. Somebody bothered to keep them. At hindi lang pinadala sa may kawayan para tunawin. Take the case of the famous Golden Tara, which is now in the Chicago Field Museum. That beautiful object, the Golden Tara, which was found by a Manobo woman in Agusan. Sino ang nag-raise ng money para bilhin yon? If I'm not mistaken, maybe it was a society of American women and men who decided to raise money to buy it kasi wala makabili sa Pilipinas nung nakabili. So in a way, the collector, the museum, these are important, especially for us, because they preserve what would have otherwise been lost. Now, ibang usapan ito sa nangyayari sa West ngayon, of the African trophies, of the African being repatriated back to Niger, back to the Benin people. Ibang usapan yon kasi talaga trophies of war yun. And for me, that's their issue to resolve. I-resolve nyo yan among yourselves kung isasoli nyo yan. But in the Philippines, the majority of what is in our museums, in our public collections, in our private collections, hindi naman masasabing trophies of war yan. Masasabing illegal excavation? Yes, because everything wala namang law at the time that says at during the 1960s, wala pang law. But what there is now, what there is studied now, what anthropologists and scholars can refer to for their collections, they're all products of collectors who sought to preserve what was there. So, tama ba yung ginawa ni Beauty? Moral issue yon. Moral issue yung ginawa ni Beauty, yung pagsusuot niya yan. Pero bilang collector, akin ito, ganito ang pag-value ko niyan. Yeah, why not? I would draw a line with mummies.
May mummies din tayo sa Sagada.
Doon ako medyo iffy. But gold, which was given to our ancestors as a way of memorializing them, well, they're there, they're preserved.
So earlier, you shared your some advice, no, about popularity. I mean, basically, you said let's not be too obsessed with popularity, you know, if you're going to be an artist or writer. Any other any other advice you want to share with?
The other important thing that I would say, something that Nick Joaquin always espoused, is to carry your teachers on your backs, to carry what you've learned on your backs. Nothing is original. Nothing anybody can do now is new, diba? It's the way you're saying it. And number two, technique. Refine your technique. A lot of people think art is of the moment, of the emotion. Let's go back to the basics. Technique. What are the things that have worked? Read the old. A lot of this is funny because in pop culture, especially pop culture, they reference things so easily because of the internet. Gagayahin ko yan, gagayahin yan. Without knowing saan ba nanggaling yun? Sa ano bang pinagmulan nito? Ano ba to? Your passion for baybayin, Howie. Let's talk about that. Your passion for baybayin and the way you're bringing it back. A lot of people will use baybayin just for design, di ba? Just for the design purpose. But the biggest challenge is investing yourself in knowledge of what it is. And for me, that's important, whether or not you're collecting, whether it's collecting, it's creating, it's what. Know what the context is. Go deeper into it. We like to think it's a design. I like it. I'll put it on my t-shirt. I'll use it as a tattoo. Diba? But I'm not condemning it. That's the entry point. You have your foot in the door. Young Filipinos, you have your foot in the door. Open the door. Go find more about it. Bakit? Ilang forms ng baybayin sa Pilipinas? Hindi lang yung nakikita natin. Ang dami-dami. Sino pa ang gumagamit ng baybayin sa Pilipinas? Mangyan, Palawanon. Ang dami pa. You know, and then that continues to open us up always to new ways. Anyway, rather than just creating, ano yung kwento nun? Sino yung taong gumawa nito? Anong ibig sabihin ng motif na yan? Your audience may not get it, but you as an artist, you as a creator, you will understand and you will use it respectfully because you understand. I love going through Facebook and just reading what young people are thinking. Kasi these are the young Filipinos who will take the vestiges of traditional culture into the future.
Well, that kind of triggered a thought, no, about Wang Od, no, the tattoo artist in Kalinga. Of course, she's being celebrated. She's now put on this
the Vogue cover,
fabulous magazine cover, ng Vogue, and but there's also been some debate, no, about this about so-called cultural appropriation by others, no, of this traditional art, no. Is there a limit to what we can do with her art, her
if
her
you
craft?
Look at the most popular tattoo of Wang Od, the most popular is really just her signature, the 3 dots. That's the most popular. And that has nothing to do with ritual. Okay, I have a question though, and this has always bothered me when I see young Filipinos, when I see friends wearing Kalinga Warrior tattoos. That bothers me. Why? Number one, to wear a tattoo like that in traditional society, headhunter ka. Highly ritualized violence. May pinagdadaan ng ritual yan, may pinagdadaan ng proseso. But are you worthy of that? That question. Again, nasa atin na yan eh. I may like it for the design. The Kalinga Warrior sleeve. I see that on a lot of young Filipinos. The Kalinga Warrior full sleeve. But at the same time, if you knew what that entailed in traditional society, and then may growth trajectory din yan eh. From headhunter to pangat, peace pact holder. So nakikita mo yung kabuuan ng pagkatao nila, the ideal path that in traditional Kalinga society you would have taken. From a young headhunter who had taken heads and proved his valor all the way to maturity as a pangat, which Makliing Dulag was, peace pact holder, negotiating peace. So yung mga ganon, doon medyo iffy ako. I'm a bit iffy about that. But the little tattoos, the 3 dots, go ahead. We're forgetting also there are other sides of the cultural spectrum na she should never have done that. She should never have given these tattoos out to outsiders. But we don't know how Wang Od has sustained her village, has sustained her family. It's again a matter of economics eh. She has sustained that, taught and sustained and popularized. The onus of learning is on us. Are we up to it? Of course, she said at the same time, napaka-mercantile ng Cordillera culture. Nothing bad about that. The Ifugaos have always been traders. The Kalinga have always, the trading culture yan eh. So, are you stopping them? No. If somebody wants to pay for it, yes, go ahead. But the onus is on us to understand what we are putting on our bodies.
That's a great point to end on. No? So much wisdom in this conversation,
Oh,
Floy.
naman.
No?
Thank you,
we'll
Howard.
let you go.
Wonderful.
Buhay ka, Floy Quintos, award-winning playwright, director, theater luminary, at marami pang iba. Maraming salamat.
Salamat din, Howard.
Hi, I'm Howie Severino. Check out the Howie Severino Podcast, an original for GMA News and Public Affairs. New episodes will stream every Thursday. Listen for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms.